to the Revised Model State Plan webinar series. My name is Ray Tamblin, and I am the Research and Communications Analyst at the National Association of State Community Services Programs, or NASCAS. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. All attendees are on mute. If you have questions during the webinar, you can ask those questions using the chat option on the webinar toolbox. The toolbar is on the right-hand side of your screen, and you'll see a text box where you can type the questions for the organizer or the host or all panelists. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. The webinar recording and a link to these PowerPoint presentation slides will be made publicly available on the NASCAS website following this session. I am pleased to introduce Janae Bjelland, the Executive Director at NASCAS.
Federal Office of Community Services. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's webinar will be led by the Federal Office of Community Services, or OCS, and facilitated by us at NASCAS. It's my honor to introduce the OCS Director, Jeannie Chapin. Jeannie has worked in the CSBG network for over 20 years at both the state CSBG office and local community action agency. As Missouri State CSBG and Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program Manager, Jeannie was responsible for contract management, monitoring, federal and state reporting, including results-oriented management and accountability, budget development training, and creating new initiatives and approaches to reduce poverty. She brings a local, state, and national level experience into anti-poverty efforts to her appointment at OCS, and we are very lucky to have her and her hardworking staff over at OCS. At this time, I'm going to pass the mic over to Jeannie.
Thank all the NASCAS staff and all the NASCAS members who've helped us to really get this project off the ground and get to the point that we're at today. It's really a groundbreaking moment for us. It's been a long time since the CSBG Model State Plan was examined and revised, and so we're very excited about where we're at right now. Before I go any further, I wanted to make sure and really thank a small group of people who worked with us here at OCS to get to this point where we're able to provide a product to the whole state network for feedback. And I want to thank Michelle Bass, Verna Best, Beverly Buchanan, Pamela Harrison, Melissa Stanford, Janae Bjelland, and Jovita Tolbert for all their work. That group of people have met several times via a telephone call and looked at this material, and it's been very informed by their ideas and how things operate in their state. And so we're very excited and very appreciative of the work that they have done. What I want to do, I think before we really dig in here and look at this model state plan, is give you a little bit of understanding about the bigger picture, because I think to understand where we're at with the model plan, you really need to understand what's going on in our network around CSBG performance management. As I think all of you know, we've been really pursuing some aggressive performance management activities, and we're really at a historic moment with CSBG. And I know that probably everybody out there listening is as excited as we are here at OCS to have those historic CSBG performance management activities called out in the President's budget last week. And the 2016 budget mentions all the work that we've been doing in CSBG and was very exciting for us, and I know very exciting for many of you out there. So to really get an understanding of the process that this state model plan is going to support, you need to have just a little bit of understanding about where we are with CSBG performance management and what the vision is and the approach, the big picture here of what we're doing. So as you all know out there in states, over the last several years in the CSBG network, we have been engaged across the community action agencies, state CSBG lead agencies, state CAA associations, national partners in really looking at an accountability framework that could strengthen the Community Services Block Grant. And that framework is really a multi-pronged approach, and as we've talked about all along, it really has to provide accountability at all three levels of this network, the local, state, and federal levels. And it looks at planning and what folks plan to do and what actual performance may be. And in this way, we really ensure efficiency and effectiveness. And we've incorporated extensive input from the CSBG network on all the elements of the performance management framework, and we think that they all really work together to strengthen results for low-income families and communities nationwide. And in the end, that's why we're pursuing all these activities, is so that we can do better for families and communities. So I mentioned accountability and plan versus actual. We've got accountability built in lots of different places, and certainly as we look at the model plan today, you will see that. But just sort of talking about the elements of the performance management framework. Let's advance to the next slide. So we have the organizational standards, which, we've recently issued an information memorandum on the standards, and they were developed by the Center for Organizational Standards, which is operated by the Community Action Partnership. And these standards really ensure that eligible entities have the appropriate organizational capacity to serve low-income families. And the standards are really built around the rules and regulations and the elements of the CSBG Act that make community action unique. And then the second area for our performance management framework is really the federal, state, and accountability measures. And these were, as with the organizational standards, these federal and state accountability measures have also been created with input from the network, and we have a draft Dear Colleague out, as I think everybody knows, that sort of outlines these federal and state accountability measures. They really are the items that we all think the states need to attend to provide good service, and what OCS needs to attend to provide good service. And so as we walk through the model plan in the next couple of days in these webinars or these conference calls, you'll see elements of the state and federal accountability measures. And then finally, the last piece is really looking at our long-term ROMA performance management framework and thinking about how we can really update it for the future. And that may be changes to the national performance indicators, changes to how we use that data and collect that data, and those are things that are still in process, but certainly you'll see some of what we think is going to be included in Aroma Next Generation included in the model plan, and then there'll be more to come on that as we move forward. So in the next slide, we give you a little graphic that tries to sort of lay this out, because we know we have a lot of different moving pieces, and over time as we've been working on this, it's been a little confusing to pull this all together, but we think it's all coming into focus, and we think this picture accurately portrays what we have released through recent Dear Colleagues and IMs regarding really determining, how well did the network perform, and figuring that out from the organizational standards, the accountability measures, and then what difference did the network make, which really will lean on and build on our ROMA work, our results, the national performance indicators, and the actual service delivery. So finally, I've mentioned different documents that we've released in the last couple of weeks, and I know that some of these seem like they were a long time coming. but hopefully as we've gotten them out there, people have seen that we've really listened to the network and we've integrated a lot of feedback from the last couple years, and that has really paid off for us with really strong, focused memorandums and draft Dear Colleagues that show really strong state and federal accountability measures. So IM 138 is the information memorandum on organizational standards, and it kind of institutionalizes the Center for Organizational Standards and lays out OCS's expectations and timelines for implementation of those. And then we have a draft IM out on state and federal accountability measures, and also that begins to lay the groundwork for some data collection modernization that we're doing. We've indicated to folks in that draft document that if they have comments about the state and federal accountability measures, they can send those in. And then finally, we have a Dear Colleague out around this model state plan revision that we're going to talk about today. And that's been announced in the Federal Register, and we're taking comments on the model state plan, and we will look at those comments as they come in and make changes, and then we'll go through an Office of Management and Budget comment period, and then eventually, after all of that feedback has been integrated, we can adopt that new model state plan for use. And my hard-working and good colleagues here at OCS are going to talk more about that process as we move forward. I'm going to hand off to Jonna Holden here in a minute, but before I do that, I just want to sort of say to all the states that I know that are listening out there that we really do appreciate your partnership in this. Many of you have given us feedback along the way, and it's been really important. I also appreciate this network's interest in looking at itself and thinking about how it can do the work in a better way, a more efficient way, a more effective way. I don't think that we would be in the budget position we're at right now if this network hadn't been willing to step up and think about what we wanted to be in the future and how we wanted to conduct business. So we, all of us here at OCS, really appreciate that this Community Services Block Grant Network has been willing to do that. I also have to acknowledge the hard work of the OCS staff and contractors such as Kate Blunt, who's here with us today, who've really been instrumental along the way in helping us move this. This kind of work doesn't get done in the federal system easy. You've got to really stay with it, and you've got to really work hard, and we're not at the finish line, but we're at a really good milestone, and we feel very positive, and we're looking forward to working with everyone in the next couple of months. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jonna and hope that folks will get a lot out of these calls. We really want folks to understand where things are at so that they can make really productive comments moving forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jeannie, for the introduction, and again, as Janae expressed, for your direction and your leadership in all of these important efforts. Again, we thank all those who are able to join us on this call this afternoon, and over the course of the next 2 weeks, OCS and NASCAS will be hosting the Model State Plan webinars, and the goal is to walk through the proposed revised content of the Model State Plan. And as you may know, we have a great enthusiasm here in our office for creating more and more acronyms to our list, our never-ending list of federal abbreviations. So if at any time you hear any of us slip and refer to the MSP, just know that we are referring to the Model State Plan. As a review of the 3 sessions that we will be doing over the next few weeks, we know that some may not have had an opportunity to comb through all of the content and questions of the Model State Plan. So our goal is to give an overview of what's in the plan and highlight some areas that are of particular interest, and also what we'll look at now in these next few slides are what will be covered in these sessions. In today's session, as Jeannie has started us off with the performance management framework, as she outlined, it will be highlighted throughout this presentation, and it's woven into many sections of the plan. We'll also explore the model state plan vision to see what opportunities there are to use the model state plan as a better tool, how it can work in practice, the timelines for getting the model state plan finalized, and also the opportunity that you have for input and feedback in this process. We'll also do an overview of the content within the plan, and we'd like to just remind you as we go through each section, we encourage you as we go through the section to submit those questions that you may have in the chat box, so that we can take an opportunity at the end to answer and have some discussion around some of those questions. In tomorrow's session at 1:30 p.m., we'll be discussing sections 6 through 9 of the plan, and again, there will be an opportunity for question and answers at the closing of the webinar. And next week, on February the 18th, we'll be discussing sections 10 through 15, wrapping up the webinar series, and providing another opportunity for question and answers. And as Ray mentioned, all 3 of these webinars will be recorded and posted on NASCA's site. So before we get into the content, just to note some things that will be beneficial to you as we go through the webinars. It will be helpful to have a copy of your model state plan as well as the accountability measures. The slides themselves are not going to have the complete wording from the plan. So you, in addition to having access to the slides, may want to have your CSBG available as well as a notepad to jot down any questions you may have. The final automated version of the model state plan will have access to the Act, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at NASCAS, but we did not include that in the draft that you've seen posted with the Dear Colleagues. In the next few weeks at the NASCAS conference, as I mentioned, we will go further into the model state plan automation and talk about a little bit more in detail how it will look in practice on the OLDC site. But OCS will also be giving a federal update where we will go more into detail on that performance management framework and also talk in greater detail about the ACSI survey, how that will be implemented and used to help us improve. So as I mentioned, the ACSI survey will be discussed in further detail at the NASCAS conference. This is an OMB tool that OCS already used in 2012 to survey state satisfaction. We are looking to convene a survey working group this year, and we'll be giving more discussion and information on that at the conference. And the purpose of that is to help us to really provide states with actionable insights to really improve their customer service experience and boost program results. So as we move into the model state plan vision, we'll talk about the critical implementation pieces of the performance management framework, and that is the model state plan. But first we're going to talk about the big picture vision of the model state plan itself. Some of you may recall that in September at the NASCAS conference, we were asking ourselves some questions about what we wanted to be able to get out of a state plan. And our vision for the state plan was for it to be clearer, streamlined, easier to use, and really something that's a helpful tool for all of us. As Jeannie mentioned, in the President's budget, there were priorities that align with some of the activities that will be going on this year within the network. And really, this is just a critical and important time for community action and the entire CSBG network. It's really an opportunity for us to demonstrate to an even greater degree the need for CSBG programs. the current model state plan, as many of us know, it may not be that clear or useful to some. Because it's paper-based, it could be cumbersome, and at times it could be confusing. It's not really currently used as a management tool. It's not used to manage performance. So our goal is to make it a more useful management tool at both the state and the federal level. So as mentioned, we have opportunities to make this a more useful tool. And if you've noticed in just the table of contents, we've reorganized the model state plan in a more thoughtful order. We want it to be clearer, we want it to be easier to use, and we want it to be a helpful tool. We have some opportunities as we revise the model state plan to really integrate automation. And one of the benefits is that it will really help us to make our work easier. It may be an investment of time and training in the beginning as we utilize new systems and new features for the first year submission. But our goal is to really significantly reduce burden and time for the states as well as the federal office in subsequent years. And we're going to discuss a little bit more today, but certainly at NASCAS, how the automation can help us do that. On the analysis side, there are also some opportunities as well. Because automation will allow for validations and checks of information, this will really allow CSBG administrators to focus on the content of the plans. And the focus would be to make better use of the information so that we can make improvement. In later stages of the automation development, it will really be our goal for this plan to actively interact and tie in with the annual report so that we have good plan versus actual performance data. So how would this plan work in practice? One major component is that it will be on the online data collection site. And at NASCAS, we hope to go in further detail of how that will work. And we're going to show you a few screenshots today. And some of you might already be using this online tool with LiveHeat. But the goal would be to make the plan less narrative-driven, more options for easier responses, and we'll show some examples of that today. The state plan will essentially spell out what the state's plan to do. So in effect, it will really be a planning document, whereas the annual report will be a more useful tool about what actually happened throughout the year. So it will be both a better planning and reporting tool, both on the state and federal level. And again, as we mentioned, we hope for these to interact at a later stage. So as we move on to the OLDC site preview, you will notice that we have the table of contents here listed and what it may look like in the actual OLDC site. And as you'll notice, each section can be accessed separately. So there are many features that are going to make the process of entry and developing the state plan a lot easier, and we'll discuss further at NASCAS. The next screenshot that you're looking at is a preview of Section 3, and it really gives us some examples of how the plan is less narrative-driven and is giving us some very easier question and response options, and it'll make it easier for states to go in and submit their plan. So as we move into the next slide, this year as Jeannie mentioned, we are in the clearance process with OMB of the model state plan document, and we will show a timeline later of where we are in that process, but we will be looking to clear that document before the end of this year. We would be looking to collect the state plan through the online data collection tool beginning September 1st. And then also integrating that annual report after 2016. So as we move into the timeline slide, we are just a few weeks into the first part of the Federal Register Notice or 60-day comment period. And we'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes here about submitting comments during that period. But as you notice, between quarter 2 and 3, there will be 2 opportunities for the public to give comments. And we're hoping to utilize those comments within this first 60-day period to really help us get a really great plan that we can then clear at the end of the 3rd quarter, so that by the 4th quarter we will have a state plan in place for states to submit on September 1st. But we know that we have a very aggressive timeline in getting these things out. But by having these documents out through the Federal Register Notice, we hope that states can already be looking at the types of questions and the types of things that will be needed in order to develop their state plan. And we plan to use quarter 3 and quarter 4 to focus in on training with and technical assistance for the automation portion of the plan submission. So during this first 60 days, which will be ending in March as noted in the timeline, we will be looking for feedback from you all. And the type of comments that we'd really like to see are not just suggestions for improvements, but also supportive comments, so that we can have a balanced perspective of what works and what needs revisions. So we want to hear also, what you like, because those things are what we want to really include in this plan. Please clearly reference your comments by section, question, or page number as appropriate when you respond. And we'll talk a little bit about where to respond. We also, at this time, welcome any suggestions that you may have about the potential automation, particularly from those who might be familiar with using OLDC or any other online system. So in addition to any questions or comments you may submit through the webinar today, we ask that you submit all formal feedback to infocollection@acf.hhs.gov. We know that this information was included in the Dear Colleagues sent out in January. We'll talk more about it at the NASCAS conference, and again, you can refer back to the information here in the webinar slides that will be posted on the NASCAS slide. So we'll take just a second for you to organize your materials as we get into the revised model state plan overview. And what I will do is at this time turn the presentation over to Liza Lowe. She's been a lead staff in OCS and one of our primary writers for the model state plan revisions, and she's going to take us section by section through the model state plan.
Thanks so much, Jonna, and hello to everybody. As Jonna indicated, I'm going to jump right into the content of the model state plan. And as a reminder, we are going to have a question and answer session at the end of the entire webinar at this point. So jot down your questions as we go. At the outset, we want to emphasize that the content in this model state plan is generally not new. This content comes from the CSBG Act and especially the requirements in the Act for the state application and plan. The content, however, may look different than it did in the previous state plan outline, as we have attempted to simplify and clarify, as Jonna noted. And another thing, instead of having the CSBG Act written verbatim into the questions, we are referencing it in hyperlinks, as Jonna noted. We have also taken full advantage of automation, so we ask for information in a way that captures usable data rather than as static data sources such as a Word document or an attachment. For example, you will submit your list of eligible entities right into the system as a table rather than as a separate attachment. So it's, again, the same content, but in a different format. The new content, mostly in this model state plan, has to do with collection of accountability measure data and other performance management data. We've also included some questions that were collected previously or currently in the IS report. So that content will not be new to you, but it is in a new location. We've now put it in the model state plan. As we go through the content of the proposed model state plan here, we are going to go section by section. However, we will not go through every single question word for word in each section, as we do not have the time. Please have the model state plan in front of you as you listen, and after the webinar, we hope that you will go back and look at each question closely and read it closely as you consider your comments that you might submit to us. Now, briefly, I want to describe to you the types of slides you will see as we go through each of the 15 sections here today and in the next 2 webinars. For each of the 15 sections in the model state plan, we have framed up one section overview slide. These slides provide basic information, including the purpose of the section, any accountability measures in the section, and also talking points or discussion points indicated by an arrow symbol. We have also spelled out the accountability measures in each section, and we'll look at those individually and in full so that you can see how they work and how they read. Finally, some sections have additional explanatory slides as needed. For the remainder of our time this afternoon, we're going to go through sections 1 through 5. Starting at the beginning, here we are at the overview slide for section 1, which is the section on the designation of lead agency and official state designation letter. The purpose of this section is to collect information on the state CSBG authorized official, the state CSBG program official, and also to collect a copy of the state designation letter. Now, if you haven't so far at this point, please take out your model state plan itself, your hard copy, and take a look at section 1. As you can see, the questions here ask for basic contact information about the officials in your state, and they also ask you to attach or upload the state designation letter. This should all be very familiar. The only thing new here, again, is the format. And also the format, as you saw on the screenshots Jana showed us, the format ultimately will also look different than it does on your model state plan. This section of the model state plan, section 1, and all the contact information mirrors the information on the standard form 424M, which is the form you used on OLDC last year to submit your 2015 state plan. Now, we are still working out the automation piece as we program our new model state plan, but we expect this section, section 1, and the standard form 424M to be connected so that when you enter data in one or the other, it will pre-populate the other. Again, we don't know exactly how this will work yet, and if it's one way or both ways, but the idea is to avoid having the user enter the data twice. In addition, once you submit this state plan the first time, this information may, to some extent, pre-populate your next state plan. Now, in section 1, there are no accountability measures. The purpose of section 2 is to collect current information on state legislation and regulation related to CSBG. Some of these questions you may recognize from the CSBG IS report. Our purpose here is to collect this underlying policy information about your programs and to keep up to date on any major policy changes. In this section, you will see for the first time how easy the information collection is. There are 4 questions. One has 3 sub-questions, and all but one are yes, no, checkboxes, or toggles. The one that is not is simply an upload of your state legislation and or regulations. So very straightforward, as you can tell. Now, some of these questions originated from the IS report, of course, and then you supplied your statute information under the previous state plan. So again, this content is very familiar. I just want to take a break from a moment before we start the next section to mention that if you don't, to mention where you can access the model state plan. We do have the model state plan up on our website. We have distributed it, and I believe this, the model state plan came out on Friday, the 29th of January, I think, in that area, around that time. And if you can't find it by email, it's available on our website at OCS. And on the CSBG webpage, and please reach out to us if you don't know where you can find it, and we will get it to you. So reach out to your program specialist. So Section 3. This is probably a more complicated section. So this is the section that's on state plan development and statewide vision and goals. And this intends to collect information on the CSBG lead agency's mission and responsibility, the state's vision and CSBG specific goals. It also collects information on the types of input the state used to develop the state plan. And this input includes the type of information or data, and also the types of groups which with the state consulted in developing the state plan. Finally, this section asks about the involvement of the eligible entities in the state in the development of the state plan. So there's a lot in this section, and if you have it in front of you, you can see it's longer certainly than Section 2. Now, some of this information may be familiar. The intent in the first few questions is for the state to put the CSBG program in context by describing the agency from which CSBG is administered, as well as the state's vision and goals for CSBG. Now, these are not, it's important to note, ROMA goals. ROMA is discussed in a separate section. Rather, the state's vision can be stated broadly in this section. And, of course, the goals are CSBG specific, but they're at a statewide level. This should be similar to how states may have described their goals and vision under the narrative section of the current state plan that you've been using up until now. Now, the intent of the latter questions is to find out how the state developed their plan and how they involved eligible entities in that process. Because the state plan is a critical tool for CSBG, how the plan is developed is very important. And as you can see, there are several accountability measures that will capture performance information in this area. You will also notice the reference to accountability measures you will also note the reference to accountability measures that are also associated with what we're calling performance management questions in the model state plan, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Now, if you look on the slide, you can see the list of accountability measures, and that they're listed in, there's 4 of them, one SA little I and one SA little double I, and then one SB little I and one SB little double I, and you'll see the asterisk indicate which ones are associated with a performance management question in the model state plan. So we're going to talk about those in the next couple of slides. You'll see here on this slide that this is the first of 4 accountability measures in this section, and all of these accountability measures are appropriately listed under the heading of development of the state plan. And by headings, I'm referring to the actual document that we published in the draft accountability measures document, draft IM. So if you have that handy, again, if you don't know where that is or you don't have a copy, you can get that off our website, and that one I believe was published on the 28th of January, or let us know if you don't have it. But we have all the list of accountability measures there, and that's where I'm getting those. But in this webinar now, we're listing out the accountability measures in full. In the model state plan, however, the accountability measures are not listed out in full, so you'll want to have all these references with you when you're reviewing the plan. So let's read through this first accountability measure on the slide. In addition to your, let's see, it reads, during the performance period, the state's Community Services Block Grant state plan included a statewide vision with CSBG-specific goals and strategies for meeting the intent and purpose of the CSBG Act. Now, let's read the question in the model state plan that is associated with this measure. Now, I'm going to have to get it out myself. This question is number 3.2 in the model state plan, and it reads, State Plan Vision and Goals. Describe the state's vision, which encompasses the use of CSBG, and CSBG-specific goals under this state plan. You can see how the question reflects the accountability measure and how the narrative that the state will enter in response to this question on the model state plan will enable the state and OCS to assess whether the state fulfilled or met this accountability measure. At this stage now, we have not developed the assessment tool for the accountability measures. You know how CAP has developed an assessment tool for assessing possibly the organizational standards developed by the Center of Excellence. At this stage, we're still working on that. But this should be very straightforward, and especially this one, because the state either included these elements, they either included a statewide vision and goals, or it didn't. So you could see whether, if you were assessing this, you would see whether the state had met the accountability measure or not. Now, the point of assessment category, which you see on this slide, it says point of assessment model state plan only. This describes the place or places which will provide the data we need and states need to use to assess each of these accountability measures. In this case, we can fully assess the measure within the model state plan. Other measures, as you will see, will require assessment in the annual report or in the next year's model state plan. For example, when we're comparing a planned activity to a performance, that would be in the annual report. But the assessment of this measure is very straightforward, and it's only, it can be assessed directly right in the model state plan. Now we're going to look at accountability measure 1SA and that reads, during the performance period, the state's Community Services Block Grant State Plan explained specific steps the state took in developing the state plan to involve the eligible entities. Now, looking at the corresponding question in the model state plan, that is question 3.4A, and that reads, describe the specific steps the state took in developing the state plan to involve the eligible entities. You can see how these are similar and how they work together. Now, just a quick note, if you're looking at your model state plan, and I see it's cut off on our version on page 5 to 6, but directly underneath this question, you will see a note in parentheses that's at the top now of page 6 on the model state plan. But that note in parentheses cites the accountability measure number that is associated with that question. So, in other words, when you're reading 3.4a, you'll read the question and then you'll see the note directly under it and you'll say, oh, that's associated with an accountability measure. So it's helpful to see the connections between the model state plan and the accountability measure questions as you read through the model state plan, and that's what I just wanted to point that out. Seeing these links are also important as you review the model state plan because not all accountability measures align as clearly with corresponding questions in the model state plan as this one does. It's very clear that these two are connected. That's for a variety of reasons, but it's important that we see the connections. And if you have any comments on this and how we are integrating the accountability measures into this tool, the planning tool, please let us know. As mentioned on the overview slide for Section 3, 2 of the remaining 4 accountability measures are associated with what we're calling performance management questions. Let's go through this first example of this type of question here. And there's 2 questions, but we've kind of combined it into one. So it's just on this one slide for these 2, 1SB little I and 1SB little double I. First, let's read through the accountability measure itself. And again, this measure, these 2 measures are under the heading of development of the state plan as appropriate. During the performance period, using data from a nationally administered survey of eligible entities and feedback from OCS and other sources, the state adjusted its plan in the next state plan submission as appropriate to improve performance regarding the extent of eligible entity participation in developing the state plan and how well the state plan reflects the input of the eligible entities. Now, this measure has a lot to unpack. Basically, it's measuring whether the state gathered feedback in a performance area and then used that information to improve performance in the next go-round. In this case, the performance area is eligible entity participation in developing the state plan on the one hand, and how well the plan reflects eligible entity input. Those are the two performance categories. And we want to know through this measure if the state may have used data to make improvements in these two areas. Now, let's talk just a minute about the data sources that the state will analyze in order to make performance adjustments. And as are sort of mentioned in this measure, one source of data here will be the survey based on the ACSI methodology, which John had touched upon earlier. And there may also be other sources of feedback, too. It's not necessarily just the survey loop. Keep in mind that adjustments the state makes based on feedback are only as appropriate. That's part of the very long phrase there, the as appropriate. It will be an adjustment you make as appropriate from one state plan to the next state plan. If performance is exemplary, the state would not necessarily need to make adjustments. Before we move on, it's important to mention one last item on this slide. You see that the assessment point is not in the current version of the model state plan. You see how it reads in the next model state plan. So as you recall, the first two accountability measures could be measured right then and there, could be assessed right in the answer to the question on the model state plan. However, the point of assessment on these accountability measures is going to be in the next model state plan, or the next plan that your state submits. Now, this will be clear, hopefully, in a moment. Let's look, we're still on the topic of performance management questions, so let's take a moment to look at the question in the model state plan that corresponds with the two performance management accountability measures we just read, and see if we can put this all together. As we read this, please take a look at the question in your model state plan as well, which is 3.4b. So this question reads, it's a model state plan question 3.4b, performance management adjustment. It reads, how has the state adjusted state plan development procedures under this state plan as compared to past plans in order, one, to encourage eligible entity participation, and two, to ensure the state plan reflects input from eligible entities? Any adjustment should be based on the state's analysis of past performance in these areas and should consider feedback from eligible entities, OCS, and other sources. If the state is not making any adjustments, please explain. The idea is that there is a performance management loop. The state gets feedback and analyzes data and identifies how or if they might improve performance, and then the state adjusts their next plan accordingly in the next planning cycle. Since the state needs data in order to identify ways to adjust their plans, the state will not need to answer these performance management questions the first time they complete this revised model state plan. But each time following, these questions will enable the state to demonstrate that they're using data continuously to adjust for improved performance. And on the slide you can see at the bottom, this is an instruction that's also in the draft model state plan. It says, if this is the first year filling out the model state plan, skip this question. But after that, you will be answering that question each time. This next slide summarizes the performance management questions embedded in the model state plan. Since this is an important topic, we're just trying to explain it as well as we can here. There are 7 of these performance management questions in total in the model state plan, and they're all pretty much in different sections of the plan. They're linked to accountability measures that that read similar to what the measure we just read a couple of slides ago. They all kind of have a similar layout, but they look at different areas of performance. And the purpose is for states to describe adjustments to the state plan based on data feedback from the field on the state's performance, again, under the previous state plan as appropriate. And the feedback, again, includes information from a nationally administered survey as well as other sources. And again, states do not answer performance management questions the first time they use a new model state plan. So as you go back and look at these questions, these 7 questions that are in the model state plan, feel free to go back to these slides, but we hope that this kind of unpacks it a little bit and makes sense. These 7 performance management questions are challenging to understand, but are critical to our performance management and accountability frameworks. We want you to look at these carefully, and please let us know if you have any suggestions. One last note, these questions in the model state plan, again, I think I just mentioned, are similarly worded. The section that is different is that section from question to question that refers to the actual specific performance area. And you will see, if Monique went back to 2 slides ago, the pieces that would be different are those pieces that are highlighted in blue. So when you look at all the questions, the 7 questions, the parts that are in black will be the same, and it's just we're looking at each different performance area. Thank you, Monique. So congratulations for getting through Section 3. I hope you've written down all your questions, and I hope that starts to make sense, and we'll look forward to answering your questions. Compared to Section 3, Section 4 and 5 will seem very straightforward. There are no accountability measures in Section 4, and the content is familiar. Section 4 is on the CSBG hearing requirements. Its purpose is to verify the state has met requirements for public notice, public hearings, and the legislative hearing. In this section, if you have your model state plan handy, you will see the first 2 questions are narrative, and then the last question allows the state to attach additional information. Now, from a data analysis standpoint, John had touched upon, narrative responses and attached documentation are not as useful. They're not as automated. However, this whole section is really more of a report area than a plan for future activity, right? We're reporting on what your hearing what your activity was in this area and not what you plan to do. So it's important to simply, in this section, you're really indicating whether the state has met the requirements of the Act. Now, under Section 4.3, you can see an example of an automated chart. I think this is the first time we've had a chart maybe in the model state plan so far. Now, these charts are an interesting and useful automation tool because the state can customize the charts to input data on items like the hearings. Now, this chart should be pretty straightforward if you look at it. Again, the data in this chart will not be needed in the annual report because we can see it all right. It's not a pre-plan and then something we're going to compare against actual. So we won't need it in the annual report, but data from other charts in the model state plan will be pre-populated in the annual report. So it's nice to take a look at the chart here, the table here. And we'll talk more about that in the next section. And we have finally arrived at Section 5, which is a section on CSBG eligible entities. While states have submitted information about eligible entities in their state plan previously, you will note that listing and categorizing the eligible entities in a table looks more like what you did in the IS report and you continue to do in the IS report. So we haven't asked for it in this kind of a format before in the past model, past plan. This section collects eligible entity information about the eligible entities up front, so we can have more opportunities in the state plan and then again in the annual report to find out what is happening with the eligible entities in each state. In addition, from an automation standpoint, once you enter the list of entities, which we know can be a long list for some large states, The list will pre-populate other sections of the model state plan, the annual report, and even future model state plans, your future plans. So we love that automation. You will note the categorizations of the eligible entities here under these bullets, which are categories such as whether the entity is a public or private agency, and then agency type, and then finally service area. These are taken more from the CSBG Act and may be slightly different from the IS report. And we look for and hope to get all your feedback on the questions in this section as well. So this concludes the content overview portion of our webinar today. And I think we're going to take a minute before we open up the question and comment period. Thank you so much.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Seth Hassett, Director of the Division of State Assistance, and we have taken some notes on the questions that we've received so far, and so I'll begin to sort of walk through some of the first ones, and then we will take, we will then have some of them shared with as we go forward. If there are additional questions, please enter them online. The first question, and actually I think we have a few questions that are in the same arena. One is, the first one that we received is if your state plan is not due 9/1/2015, is the next deadline 9/1/2016. And I believe what this relates to, and I'm actually going to link it to a second question, which was related to the if you have a 2-year, how this affects the issue of a 2-year model state plan or a 2-year state plan, and so and I'm going to ask others to kind of add to this as necessary, but the general idea here is that states would continue to be able to do a 2-year state plan. There would be an opportunity for, in the first year, we would be asking for some of this information that is not included in a existing state plans to be provided and added for the to start the baseline for a performance management system. In future years, there would be opportunities for updates or additional information to be provided without the submission of a full state plan as necessary, and there would only be a couple of sections where that would be potentially relevant. But this does not replace the idea of a 2-year model state plan. There would be, again, an opportunity for an annual update of certain critical information, but there would not be the full process that would be expected for a regular state model state plan. The second question, and we can talk more, and again, I think that would be an area that we can talk further about how that would look and work, both at the NASCAP conference, but also in, we will be providing further guidance on that. A second question that came up was, can information for these narrative sections, section 3.1, 3.2, 3.4, be pasted from Word into, or from a Word document into the OLDC page, or will the state CSBG office be required to type the information into the text boxes? And the answer is that, checked with 2 sources here, that there should be the capacity, and there will be the capacity to be able to cut and paste. And so likely what we will be seeing is that there would be the ability to develop this in a Word document format, and then, for these critical sections to paste them into the online format. And certainly from our experience of these types of systems, it's certainly much easier to make the modifications and edits and comments and so forth in a Word document, at least for the narrative sections, and then to paste them in. other questions that we have? We had a question about where the model state plan is on the OCS website. We did hopefully try to update that. If you go to the regular OCS website and follow the program links to the CSBG site, all of these documents are prominently posted on the landing page for CSBG, and we can send out further links or encourage. NASCAP can also send those, but they're easily found. And I think they're actually in the comment page for you to follow the link already. Do we have another question? So, so the question here is, since everything is automated for the most part, what are we expected to have to present the plan to the public hearing and the legislative hearing? In the past, we gave draft copies of the entire plan to the public and legislature HHS committee. Again, so what we would frame here is there will be we will be working with you around ways to do this, but one option would be to develop a Word document or a comment document, and for us to provide a template that you could use to circulate. Obviously, we are part of the issue of us putting out this early information is to give you a sense of what information we're looking for in the plans. But also we have, from what we understand, there are ways, and we are continuing to explore ways to make a draft version of an automated version produce a printout or a version of the plan that can be circulated. So these are that they can print. So the OLDC system, once you have put in the information, you will be able to print out and have like a PDF version or a document that you can circulate. You know, we know that reality is the first year is going to be the tough one on this because we're, as we see, the timeline is we're working on it and as we go. But as this goes in the future, we think this will become a relatively, this will help this be an easier process to produce that PDF, circulate it, get comments, and move from there.
This is Jeannie, and I would just add to that. You know, I think states have varying ways that they produce the public version for comment, and sometimes that's a narrative version. Sometimes it might have been exactly the model plan that we had put out. I think we want to, as we move forward, we'll try to make that there to be lots of flexibility and user friendliness, because what we want, as you can see from our state accountability measures, we think it's very important that states make information available in a way that people can comment, and then states can take that feedback and use it. And so for that information to be user-friendly is very important. So we can talk more about that, but there's also a lot of flexibility at the state level for how you make that information transparent for people to comment on.
So the next question we have is on Section 4, legislative hearing requirements. Can we find out more information related to what is expected? If a state agency's budget is heard at a legislative hearing in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, and CSBG is part of the budget presented, would this meet the requirement for the legislative hearing? So the first thing I will frame is that this is not a new requirement. This is part of both a statutory requirement for CSBG and a part of the current model state plan and current submissions. What I would first look at is your current state practice and what has been the standing practice for legislative hearings to meet the requirement. And then we could consult with you around that. But again, this is, I would first look to what you have, the current procedures and current process the state has gone through for legislative hearings. And we can have further consultation on that topic. The next question we have is, how do you share the state plan for comments when it's inputted into a database? So again, so this is the issue of there are going to be a number of options for how to do this. There will be ultimately the option to use what's entered into the database and have a PDF that document that comes out and can be circulated, but recognizing that many states have different practices with regard to information and how that's put forward for comment. There is the possibility, as we mentioned earlier, of creating a Word document that is based on the model state plan, at least for a starting point for input. Again, there will be a variety of options to do this. The next question is, it appears that the performance questions in Section 3 seem to take away the block grant freedom of local agencies to administer the grant and put more burden on the state offices to set program goals. I guess I hope we would reframe that's certainly not the intent at all. And I'm kind of actually wanting to pull the section that we're talking about here. Really the section on vision and goals as outlined is not a new requirement. This is part of what is has been a part of the model state plan. It's the statewide vision. These are often high level, they're often high level vision for, and it may be governor vision priorities for the low-income population, but it does not preempt or in any way change the model of the community needs assessment and local planning and a community action plan for the local community. So we would hope these goals would be high-level, broader goals for the network, for the use of the network in the state, and would not, and again, this is not a new requirement. This is part of what's been in the model state plan existing, so there certainly is not a change in policy there.
Yeah, Seth, I would just add that if anything, it strengthens the role of the eligible entities because it puts an accountability and measure in place that really examines whether the state is using eligible entity feedback to improve, and that you know, if you've got eligible entities giving feedback to the state, we want to make sure the state's using that moving forward. And so I think on the contrary, it doesn't take away the block grant nature, it just reinforces the partnership between the state and the eligible entity. So you know, there may be a little bit of you know, there obviously is a question here, but I just want to reaffirm, you know, that we're not in any way removing the block grant nature and removing any focus on the eligible entities.
So the next question was on question 3.4b. What type of input are you anticipating would be provided by eligible entities? Would it be related to things such as the allocation formula, use of discretionary funds, etc.? Seems a bit more difficult to get input because in the past we had an actual state plan document to present, and now it will be automated. So there are a couple of things here. One is, and we will, those of you who are coming to the NASCAP conference, and again, we really do encourage that. We're looking forward to that opportunity to have conversation. We mentioned at the beginning of this that we are working toward the American ACSI survey, which will be a tool that will help us to get input that can be used in these areas. And what we are planning to do is to develop a work group that will work with us around the development of the questions that will be included in this survey. We've identified the general areas in the accountability measures, and so you can read those, and they do touch on things like there's not a discussion of the allocation formula. There are questions about distribution of funds or the technical assistance, use of discretionary funds, communications, but the specific questions that will be asked are still to be formulated. And again, our plan for that is to develop it with a work group of state CSBG agencies to make sure that we ask questions in a way that's going to provide useful input for this. So again, I think that now to make it the follow on there is that the opportunity to get input because of the document, I guess I would frame as there, as we shared, there will be, we do expect that there would be a document or ways to share a document for input and comment, but that also we're encouraging that it be other opportunities and ways to get input from the network, from the eligible entities about sort of the priorities and needs.
I think if a state considers their process, you know, by the time you get to putting stuff into OLDC, you've already got comment from the agencies and the states have made decisions and you're ready to put it in an online system. The online system is to just make your submission to OCS easier. Your process for conveying to the eligible entities your proposals about how technical assistance money would be used or, you know, what you might be doing in the realm of monitoring or standards comes well before you're, you know, in front of the computer system entering data. So I just want to encourage folks to sort of, you know, you're now going to have a new system to help you with your work, and that system obviously reflects the kinds of information that are needed to submit a model plan, but there's probably lots of other ways that you are putting forward to the agencies your proposals about, you know, different elements of this plan. The system should not inhibit your ability to get comment in any way. It should actually make things easier for you, which allows you more time to interact with the agencies, hopefully. So
the next question, and it's actually one, was that can a definition be provided for limited purpose agency for question 5.1? And for any of you who listened to the webinar recently on organizational standards, the presentation there, limited purpose agencies are a very small number of agencies referenced and essentially grandfathered into under the CSBG Act that are included in the network that are funded, but there are actually very few states that have them. There are, and I don't actually have the number, but it's a handful, I think, of agencies that, for one reason or another, may not provide the full comprehensive array of services, but were included in the original network of CSBG. And the majority of states simply don't have them. Those that do have historically labeled them and included them in their state plan. So this will provide the opportunity to include and describe those agencies. But the reality is, if you don't have already labeled and identified limited purpose agencies within your state system, this is going to be a moot point. There's not going to be, no agency will be defined that way for the future.
Seth, I think this might also be a good place to say that in the system, there'll be hyperlinks with definitions and to the statute. And so any place that folks think that those kinds of hyperlinks or definitions would be helpful, that would be a good comment to make so that we can make sure to catch all those.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, one of the things that we're not able to convey with the outline that we've provided for comment is that, you know, what the, experience of working with the document will be, because that is one of the things that the team is working extensively on, is anytime there's a reference to a section of the CSBG Act, the system will have built-in hyperlinks so that you will be able to kind of click and instantly pull up that particular section. Or if there is a, again, if there are terms that come, in some cases do come from the Act, but you would like for there to be a definition to the extent that it's available, we will include it. And again, the hope is that the experience of actually completing this, if there is this sort of a reference, you will have, ready information from the online system. And again, we're not able to fully convey that in the draft that we've submitted at this point. Okay, the next question is, our state has in place an approved 2-year plan for FY 2015-2016. We will be making minor amendments involving program narratives, expenditures, and budget allocations. Will we need to enter our plan to make the amendments via OLDC, or can we submit a paper amendment? So I think what I would like to, as we mentioned, there is going to be an opportunity to provide there are some information that is new information that we're asking, and we're be clearance for submission. And so those that have a standing state plan would be able to provide just those critical bits of information. For these, the idea of minor amendments involving the narratives, expenditures, and budget allocations, we would want to receive those via OLDC, and what we will need to kind of, and it may be worth kind of having a direct conversation around this, is to understand the nature of them, to make sure that our system is going to have the capacity to do that in the first year.
I think that, just being completely clear that, for this first go-around for 2016, there may be some duplication, but we want to try to get everybody into OLDC in 2016. So if it's the second year of your 2-year plan, there, may be some additional effort for you. But as Liza said in her presentation, this will get so much easier in the subsequent years because we will have a lot of information that can be pulled over from year to year. Those of you that have interacted with our LIHEAP program, we've done a similar thing with LIHEAP, and folks will see, because LIHEAP started using the OLDC state plan submission last year, and it really will make their submission this next year easier. So we know we're going to have a little bit of additional work for some folks, but in the long run, we think it'll get easier, and we want to be able to provide consistent data across all the states and be able to do our analysis and have the states do analysis. So we're going to have to face this reality, which might not be ideal, but when you're making a change like this, you just have to deal with these kind of things.
So here's the next question, and this indicates the instructional note regarding Q13 of the Model State Plan appears to ask for more information in the designation letter than prior letters. I understand the need for the names and contact info for the state CSBG officials, as previously provided in the transmittal letter. Please explain why the governor's designation letter was chosen to obtain all the state contact info. Thanks. So first of all, I think that I will just outline, we are receptive to comments, and part of the reason for having a comment version out here is if that we want to make sure if that is a potential issue that we would there may be room for adjustment there. I think what we're focused on here is some clarity on the critical information that's going to be needed for the designation letter, but we also want to make sure that we don't overload what needs to go into that, because certainly with certain kinds of contact information and other things, we know it's more subject to change and we want it to be readily updated. So I guess what I will say here is if that appears to be a concern, we certainly will note the concern, and we also would take that as a comment in the, I would encourage both entering it in the official 60-day comment period so that we can take that into consideration, but we will also have follow conversation here. I don't know if there's anyone that wants to add anything to that. Or
I can see the practicality of not having the CSBG contact in the governor's letter, because it's hard to get a governor's letter,
right.
And lots of times they do blanket ones for mini block grants, and so it could be different contact people. So we can look at that. That's not a big deal, I don't think. Yeah,
I think we want to be, especially, those of us who have not, we know it would be hard we know how difficult that is, and for many states have we don't want to cause any wrinkles in that, but we do want to make sure we have a clearly stated designation letter, one that stands on, that meets a reasonable standard. So we'll look at those comments and take them into account. The next question is, if I understand correctly, states that submitted 2015-2016 plans will be to enter certain critical information as an update. Could you please elaborate? Will updates need to go through the same process as a new plan? So I think one of the things we can provide further guidance and discuss it, but one of the I want to make sure we, don't make up an answer on the fly. I will tell you that the general thinking would be that if you have all of the designation letter, assurances, certifications, the things that need to be signed and officially certified by the leadership to make the plan official, then you would not, in our judgment, need to duplicate those and redo those sorts of things. However, if it comes to providing an initial update on the section related to organizational standards, and you were describing your process there, that could be entered online by the appropriate official. So, we do have, again, we are working through our guidance on that, but I think the general idea here is that you would not be having to, again, go get a new certifications of the other things that made the plan official. You would just be providing the additional necessary information based on our, that would not have been provided in the prior plan. And again, we'll look for ways to make that as straightforward and easy as possible. Okay, the next question is, how can a state report improvements in eligible entity participation in state plan development accomplished in recent cycles? Is info not sought by OCS until after first use of the model state plan, use of OLDC model state plan? So I think that is where, and Liza can add to this, but that's where we have indicated we're not expecting that to be part of the first round submission of the model state plan, that it would be for subsequent state plans. Okay, since the model state plan won't be finalized until 6/30/15, is it safe to assume that the OLDC system won't be ready for states to enter their plans until July or August? That's for the online submission, that is the case. What we are working to do and hoping to do is provide as many tools and materials in advance, and certainly the questions that are included, and perhaps even looking at ways to put this into a Word format so that you have the tools to work with in the development. Hopefully the entry into the OLDC system will be a relatively rapid process, But yes, the online system, we cannot make it finally available until we have the OMB clearance. And so again, our other hope there is to continue to do extensive training so that by the time you get to the that system and pull it up, you will have, it'll all be, you know, quite familiar in terms of what the content and how it's going to look and feel. Okay, next, okay, so we are out of time. What I want to do is remind everyone to please register for sessions 2 and 3, and to submit your questions from today through the formal feedback process. So again, there is guidance on the, okay, we do have one more question? Okay. All right, just to verify, if a state just submitted its 2-year plan in this past year, 9/1/14, the state will still be expected to provide an update by 9/1/15 on MSP principles that were not addressed in the 9/1/14 state plan. And yes, so I will verify that is the expectation that we are putting forward. So, okay, this has been a great start for, and we certainly do encourage you to register for sessions 2 and 3. Again, there were some great comments that we received, and so again, if you have, especially, I think that just as an example, the question related to the governor's designation letter, that's the kind of, those are things that we definitely want to hear from you. We want to make sure we don't have any, you know, that we can anticipate any wording issues that make a couple words might make a big world of difference in how this works for you. So we want those input but also, again, register for session 2 and 3, and then we will, again, have a further opportunity for conversation at NASCAS. Yes.
And this is Jeannie, and I guess the only thing I would add, I think staff have done a great job of preparing this, and we really appreciate the partnership with NASCAS on arranging this and helping to host. If folks have any ideas about how we might structure, organize, or prepare for future webinars, please let us know or let NASCAS know. We want this to work for folks, and we really are trying to do a deep dive here so folks can really think about what the issues might be, and we can get those surfaced quickly, address them, and move on, because we want to get our clearance. We want that to be successful and quick, and so the more that folks understand where we're going, the better. And we also want to have a lot of understanding before we even get to NASCAS, so we can have even more robust conversation when we get to the NASCAS conference. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks everyone. We'll look forward to the future, the next couple of webinars.